Hello everyone and welcome to Adam Sharp YouTube channel. And in this video, I'm going to be discussing one of the articles that I just published on my blog. The article is titled "The Hidden Cost of AI Generated Unit Test, Sacrificing Domain Knowledge." And you can find the link to the article in the YouTube description so you can read it, but I'm going to also be discussing this article in this video. So for over or close to 20 years, what I've been working with many different companies, and these companies included like retail, healthcare, oil and gas, and energy. The biggest challenge that I faced was not really the technology that I was using. And I've used a lot of different technologies ranging from, ASP.NET, Node, Express, JavaScript, even Java for BlackBerry development, and obviously iOS. All right. The biggest hurdle or the challenge was actually gaining the domain knowledge. Now, when I talk about domain knowledge, I actually means understanding the business, understanding the domain that you're working in. And since I work with retail, healthcare, oil and gas, energy, they're all very different. So these are very different domains. They're businesses that run in a very different way. They have different process, different people obviously managing those processes. So learning the business, I think, is much harder things because you can't really simply go to ChatGPT or you can't really go to Stack Overflow and ask like, okay, how do I do this, right? For technology perspective, you can, but the business, that requires a little bit more deeper understanding. And one of the ways that I used, and obviously if you read books, one of the ways that you can find about the business domain or to learn about the domain that you don't know, that's the most important part. If you are working in a project, let's say that you have all your life, you have worked in oil and gas companies. Now you're working in a medical company or some sort of a medical insurance company. Well, that's a completely different domain. The skills that you have learned for oil and gas, they're fine, they're good, but now you have to learn a completely different domain, a medical insurance domain. They will have different words. They call it ubiquitous language. Like when people are talking, like domain experts, they're not talking in technical terms. They're talking in a different language, which is business language. So we as developers, we need to learn that language because that language is then portrayed and reflected in the code because that is what you're trying to solve, real world problems. So one of the ways to understand the domain is to write unit tests for it. And that is what most people do when they go to a job and they can't really understand the code they're looking at because it's in a completely different domain. They start to write tests for it. Now, over here, I talk about one of these functions. You can see it's like some sort of a insurance plan struct that has a function called process visit. Now, this is a very important function. If you're in the insurance industry, the process visit function is very important because that processes the visit that is responsible for your co-pays, how much you're going to charge the patient, how much is covered, what things are covered and what not. And it is a complicated function, right? And these are all the domain rules inside the function. Now, we're not really talking about the validity of the code, meaning we're not talking about, oh, you should have created this function in a different way. This is already there when you started the job, right? You can make it better, but first we need to understand it, right? I don't know what's going on in this function. What are these things? Copay for GP? What is GP? What is this check doing over here? What are all these one minus coinsurance? What does that even mean? So all of these things are domain rules. And the only way to understand these domain rules is to understand the domain. Or if you only way to write tests for these domain rules is to actually understand the domain, right? So one way to understand the domain is to write tests for it, like manually write tests for it. Go there, start your test project, and then just write tests, and that will give you a little bit more insight as what exactly is going on. And maybe during the test, you can even like refactor some parts of it, just so that you know what's going on. All right. But what if you are not writing these very important domain level tests manually? You can just use this function and the associated or dependent code and ask ChatGPT, and it can create some tests for you. You can see these tests are created by ChatGPT. They look fine. I mean, if you run these tests, they will probably pass. But even though you're able to do that, what my recommendation or what the article is about is maybe you shouldn't. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And the reason is when you create these tests, and although these tests might be testing the correct things and they might be running correctly and they might be giving you the green check mark, all the tests passing, this was your opportunity to learn about the domain. And you just delegated it to the test, right? Now you might say that, well, no, this is just a starting point. I'm going to read the test now and I'm going to make sure I understand. But come on, really? We know that once you start seeing those green check marks, you're gone, right? You're not going to come back. Test is passing, move on to the next one. And eventually, when you have to change these things again, then you will have to go back again, and run these, well, not run these tests, but you have to update the test again because you still don't understand what exactly is going on in the code. And sometimes it's a developer, they just don't want to understand the domain. Once the test is passing, once they see those green check marks alongside with all those tests, that's all they need, and they will move on to the next one. Sometimes it's just the time constraints. Maybe you just didn't get the time to understand these things. So my recommendation and what this article is about is especially when you are writing or trying to write the test for the domain, especially for the domain, make sure that you invest the time to understand the domain. Don't let AI write the test. All right? Especially for the domain and especially when you don't understand the domain. Because AI will write the test and those tests may actually pass, but that was your opportunity to learn about the domain and you just missed it. You just delegated it to an AI. AI created the test, you ran it, you saw the green check marks, okay, move along. All right, now I'm sure somebody's going to comment, no, I always go and then I will always read, but come on. It's kind of like copy pasting, right? I mean, how many of you copy paste and then try to learn from it? Now, even if that is a counter argument that, oh, I'm going to read the test and learn from it, you still miss the opportunity to learn about the domain because now you're limited to these things, the test itself that AI have generated, but you didn't go deep into learning what all these things mean in the business world. All right? Nobody is questioning the validity of the test, by the way. I'm not saying that these tests are badly written by AI. Nobody is doing that. And it's actually literally the first paragraph. The main point of the article is not about mistrusting AI generated code. I use AI all the time. All right? But I'm very careful in things that I need to understand because it is going to come up. It is going to come up in the meetings. You're going to have meetings. And if you don't understand the domain and the language that the domain experts are speaking, you're going to get into trouble. I mean, your productivity will be very slow. And to be really honest, I mean, the technology part, like, how to fill a drop-down list, how to do these animation, I think those are the easy things. Those are the things you can just use ChatGPT. It can give you the code and you can read the code and you can understand it and you can execute it. Or you can just put it on Stack Overflow and Stack Overflow will, help you out, or people over there are going to help you out, find the solution for those technical problems. I think the main difficulty or the main challenge is to understand the domain, understand how the business works. And if we are delegating this part to AI, then I believe that we are missing that opportunity I'm sure a lot of you will say, well, no, I will always read the code and this will help me as a starting point. Actually, I would say this is kind of like an ending point for you. Once you see those green check marks, you'll be like, I'm done. What's the next thing I need to work on? Because I see all the green check marks, I'm done. And I know most of you will say, no, I will always go there. But deep down, you know that it is true. Once you see those green check marks, you're out of there. You're done, right? So this is what I'm discussing in this article. You can read about this article. If you have a really simple domain, a domain that you know inside out, then in those cases, well, depending on the app, I mean, in those cases, you may be able to get help from ChatGPT or some sort of an AI tool to create those tests. Even, I mean, in cases where you actually know the domain inside out. All right. I mean, I only use unit testing or testing in when I'm testing something that is a little bit more complicated, because the return on the investment on testing something really simple is not there, because you're still writing code, you're still producing code that needs to be maintained, and code, is a liability. It's not an asset. So the less is always more. So the less code that you're going to be writing, make sure that it is testing the right thing, which in this particular scenario is the domain. All right. So once again, I'm not saying that you cannot use AI for testing. I'm not saying that AI code cannot be trusted. I use AI all the time. All right. I'm just saying that if you are working in a domain that you don't understand, maybe you're from a background of retail development or retail business, and now you are entering into some sort of domain that you don't know, maybe oil and gas, maybe energy, maybe it is some other domain like medical insurance or hospital domain, then the best way to understand that domain is to write tests, talk to the domain experts. And if you're delegating that responsibility to AI, then I think you are missing a very important opportunity. All right. You can definitely use AI to learn the domain. You can learn the business parts of it, but it's definitely hard. I mean, a domain expert will be your best point of contact to sit with the domain expert, maybe buy them a lunch, a sandwich or something, and then ask them questions about the domain. Not the code itself, but the domain. Like, okay, what happens when a person submits a claim? And the domain expert will answer, well, we need to check if the claim has been accepted or not, and if it's in network and out of network, and if they have reached their copay and reached their out of expense. So all of these things will be reflected in the code. So that is how you will learn the domain, not by delegating it to an AI and getting those green check marks and moving along. And I think the domain is the heart of the application. So make sure that you don't miss that opportunity to learn the domain. All right. Thank you. Oh, by the way, if you like this video and want to support my channel, then check out my courses on awesomesharp.school. Actually, I'm working on a really good course right now. It's called the Full Stack E-commerce app development using SwiftUI, Node, and Postgres. So this is currently in development, but you can definitely sign up for that course and you will get access to all the different sections that are published, which includes quick tour of Express.js, building user registration system, introducing MVC pattern for Node.js backend, and there are some other sections that's going to be coming up later. All right, so this is going to be a really good course if you want to learn about SwiftUI and create your own backend, because that's one of the things that is lacking in the iOS community. Is you're just too focused on iOS. You should expand and learn backend development also. Create your own backend. I mean, you can use Firebase, you can use Superbase, which is great, but creating your own backend, now that makes you a full stack developer and not the iOS developer. Apart from that, I also do have workshops. Some of the workshops are coming up in a couple of weeks. I have an introduction to testing in iOS using Swift workshop coming up on October 12th, this is going to be a 3-hour workshop, and this is going to be hands-on workshop. We're going to learn about unit testing, mocking, stub, integration testing, end-to-end testing. So these workshops are available, and you can get access to all of these workshops if you simply sign up for the annual plan, or you can just go and buy the individual workshops also. So it's kind of like up to you. And also we have Introduction to Supabase for iOS developers coming up on October 26th. So this is going to be a great workshops also. All right. So that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to like it and share it. Thank you.